Idolatrous activities. Christian parents should avoid any kind of idolatrous activities. Here now is Gene.
Jacob came to grips with this. And here we find that it resulted from this crisis there in Shechem. Here's good coming out of evil. An Old Testament illustration that God can take all this evil, make it work together for good. And he did. God said to Jacob, "Get up. Time to get out of here, Jacob. Look what's happened to your sister. Look what's happened to your brothers. Look what happened to you. Get up, get out. Go to Bethel." Bethel now is back there where I believe that Jacob first met God in a salvation experience, when he was running away from Esau. And he was asleep, and he saw that ladder from earth to heaven. And he woke up and said, God is in this place. And that's where he made a commitment to the Lord, to worship him at Bethel. And so after all these years, God says it's time to go back to Bethel. Build an altar there to the God who appeared to you when you fled from your brother Esau. And so Jacob said to his family and all who were with him, and boy, here he becomes assertive. He became direct. We're going to see that Jacob tended to be a very passive individual. And it took this crisis for him to be direct. He says, get rid of the foreign gods. Did he know the foreign gods were there? Of course. He knew that his beloved had those in her saddlebag. He knew that. Get rid of the foreign gods that are among you. They were everywhere. He knew that. And even though he built an altar to worship God, he allowed these foreign gods to be used by his family and their servants. And he says, purify yourselves, change your clothes. We must get up and go to Bethel. Jacob has got the message. Took a crisis to get his attention. But God told him what to do, and he's obedient. He said, I will build an altar there, not here outside this pagan city. I will build an altar there to the God who answered me in the day of distress. I'm going back to worship God and him alone. He's been with me everywhere I've gone. This is a real experience for Jacob here. And then they gave Jacob all their foreign gods. He got their attention, and their earrings, which were related to their rituals and their foreign gods. Jacob hid them under the oak near Shechem. He got rid of them, buried them in the ground, and then they moved on. Now, we read that once he got to Bethel, Jacob set up a marker at the place where he had spoken to him. That is, years before now, there under the stars, where he made the stone his pillow, he set up a stone marker. And he poured a drink offering on it, he anointed it with oil, and Jacob named the place where God had spoken with him Bethel. This is the place now where he's back worshiping God. He was saved at Bethel, and in a sense, he's being sanctified at Bethel as he's becoming more and more progressively like God the Father. Salvation experience at Bethel. Here is this experience of dedicating his life to God. A new beginning, as it were, for Jacob. Didn't solve all of his problems, but certainly it's a step forward in his faith. Now, this raises some penetrating questions, really, I think, for all of us, and that is, what foreign gods, quote, quote, still influence our own thinking and actions? They can be there and we don't even know them, or we ignore them. We need to answer that question. Anything that comes before God is an idol. What do we allow to come into our homes that violate biblical principles? That can be a foreign god. Number 3, what kind of sensuous and humanistic gods do we serve? That's the world in which you live, isn't it? Humanistic gods, people, sensuous gods. We see this all about us. And we're moving in that direction as a culture. Number 4, what about materialism? Boy, this is one of the biggest gods of all. In fact, the Bible calls materialism idolatry. It specifically, in the New Testament, calls it idolatry. We're putting material things before God. And that's a tough one because we need material things to live. But when they become our gods, then we're in trouble in violating God's will. In Matthew 6:24, we have a very clear-cut distinction when it comes to materialism. We read, no one can be a slave of two masters. And that shows the dividing line. Since either he will hate one and love the other, he'll be devoted to one and despise the other. In other words, there's no blending here of proper use of material things, but material things are a god, and God is God, and we have chosen to worship material things rather than God. And in that case, Jesus became very direct. He said, you cannot be slaves of God and of money. You cannot worship the two. You have to make a choice. Now, obviously, that choice involves balance in relationship to the proper perspective on money. And here's the key in 1 Timothy, for the love of money, not material things, but the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. How many times have you heard that verse misquoted, that money is the root of evil? No, it's the love of money that is the root of all kinds of evil, and by craving it, and that's a key word, that's idolatry, craving it, some have wandered away from the faith, pierced themselves with many, many pains. And so here we have a very important balance, I believe, that sets us up for this question. As parents, what kind of decisions can we make to protect our children from evil influences and yet not create a situation where they secretly circumvent our restrictions in other situations? And here is the incredible challenge that we have, and that is by withholding, for example, things from a child to teach them not to crave that. If we're not careful, we can create a craving for it. And that is the very opposite of what we want to do. That takes a lot of wisdom. To withdraw from a child certain things that everybody has, friends, neighbors, and say, we're going to teach you to be non-materialistic by not letting you have the things all other children have. I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. You're going to create a craving for what other children have. That just happens automatically. Now that takes wisdom, doesn't it? How do you balance that in relationship to children? The other thing is, I'm not going to let you watch any television. We're going to get rid of our television. It's not going to be in our house. In our culture, I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. They're going to sneak around, and they will be watching it, but they're going to be watching it under no supervision in somebody else's house. And they're not going to tell you about it, and if you ask them, they'll probably lie. Does that take wisdom? That takes wisdom. We're not living in an easy situation here. Neither were these Old Testament people. It takes a lot of wisdom to be able to work through all of these things. And I think the most important principle relates to consistency in our lives. Being consistent in how we live in front of our children, because, believe me, they are watching what we are doing. I was with one of my grandsons the other day. We were in our family room, and I had the TV set on, and on came a segment, and he was over here doing something, and that segment was not appropriate. It just came on, and boy, did I see him look and listen, and did I see him look at me and what I was going to do with that. Just that quick. And just that quick, I changed the channel. I mean, our children are perceptive. And we've got to be consistent. And that is a very, very important basic concept, I think, in relationship to applying this principle. Let me read it again. As Christian parents, we're to avoid any kind of idolatrous activities. And that takes a lot of wisdom.